It's a unique thing as a father to have the opportunity to see your sons grow into manhood and make that transition from always being dependent on your input and your thoughts and your ideas and your discipline and your guidance. That fatherly advice that really, it sounds like a voice inside your own head when you have that constant input. To be a dad and watch that transition as your boys become young men and move on into manhood, and they assume responsibility for their own actions, and they assume responsibility for their own decisions, and they take part in the outcome of those decisions. And my son came home. He's been away for a weekend, drove himself and left town. We didn't know exactly where he was going, other than that he was going with his girlfriend's family to go out of town. And when he came back in the door, he had a bit of a mark on his face, on his left cheekbone. And I asked him, did somebody punch you? And he said, no, probably if somebody had punched me, I'd still be in that town and sitting in jail somewhere. And to think for a moment that there's some truth to that, and to ask the question, why is that true? I think it starts with a real honest accountability of himself. See, I didn't have to go into the whole lecture of, you look like you've been fighting, why would you fight, anything like that. He went through the conclusion process on his own as a 19-year-old man, that if I were to get in an altercation, I would probably find myself losing control of my temper, which means I would probably end up being arrested, which means I would probably end up in jail, and I would probably still be sitting there because I know my dad's not the type to bail me out of my problems that way. Now, that's not a conclusion that everyone at that age would come to. It's not a thought process that everyone at that age would walk through. In fact, if we were to look at even the suicide rate curve for boys versus girls, at about 9 or 10, they're pretty much the same. By the time they're 13 or 14, boys more than double. By the time they're 17 or 18, boys are 4 or 5 times more likely, and into their early 20s, boys are almost 10 times more likely to commit suicide when the father is not in the home. So we do have a problem of racism in our country. We also have a problem of difference in education levels. In many counties across the United States, and I'm guessing it's probably true around the world. I haven't done the full research, although the United Nations has. We built more prisons than we have colleges. We also have 93% of the population, and I'm going to put the link. There was a very well-researched TED Talk that I was watching recently. I'm going to put the link to that underneath in the comments of this video, because he references some of these same things: the rate of prisons, the rate of suicide for men who are raised in a home, or boys who are raised in a home without a father, for the number of school shootings that are perpetrated by white males when there's no father in the home, murder of parents, murder of mother when there's no father in the home. Now, as a father, I was raised without my father in the home, and I can tell you some of the rage issues that I dealt with were probably related to that. Some of the abandonment issues that I've dealt with in my life were probably related to that. I've done a lot of research, extensive research. In fact, I was looking this morning before starting this video. I really wanted to share some stuff with you. Probably 3 of the most impactful books in my life I read while I was in the Air Force between the ages of 19 and 23. And those 3 books that were the most impactful, besides what I've read in the Bible, were Bringing Up Boys by James Dobson, Wild at Heart by John Eldredge, and Becoming a Person of Influence by John Maxwell. Those 3 books probably became the father in my life, speaking into my life what it meant to be influential, what it meant to persuade and to change and to impact people around you, and how everything you do and say has a lasting impact. But prior to that, I had no idea what consequences looked like. I could talk myself out of almost any situation, and sometimes I would test the environment. I would test the situation just to see if that was the case. I would push against authority. I would push against right and wrong. I would push against the envelope just to see if I could get away with it and see if I could talk my way out of it. After reading those 3 books, I learned more about who I am as a man, who I should be as a boy, than anything else in my life. Now, I have regrets, even as a father. My My oldest son loves the outdoors. He would love to go fishing and hunting every weekend. That would be our thing. But I had limited exposure to that growing up. And so as much as I love it when I get to go, it's not A, a craving, and B, I've never carved out the niche in my life to make time available to that. I'm much more of a researcher. When I have quiet time, I'd rather study, oddly, than to go out in the woods. And I like to study in the woods, but I've never learned to fish. I'm not very good at it. The irony is that that desire and that passion for him doesn't stop burning just because I don't have a passion for it. In Wild at Heart, John Eldredge talks about how the natural part of a boy, especially a young boy, is to discover, it's to develop, it's to be brave, it's to do crazy things. And both John Eldredge and James Dobson point to the fact that boys between that 8 and 12-year-old range are just learning what it means to be a man. And they're looking for whatever picture they can find. Unfortunately, in today's society, those boys find the picture in video games. There aren't as many guys out there. I watched a very unusual video yesterday. Not my style of thing to watch, but I'm a researcher. So I was just scrolling through various things on YouTube, and I just put in fast cars. And here's an irony. About half of the videos listed under fast cars were young men, probably 14 to 18 years old, many of them not even old enough to have a driver's license yet, who were building cars on games like Grand Theft Auto and some of the other, I can't remember all, Turismo I think is one of them, where you can build your own car, and after you've won so many races, you have more points and you can add to them. I know my sons have played those games. These boys don't have driver's license yet, but they can tell you the difference between a turbocharger and a supercharger. They've probably never had grease under their fingernails at all. But the game has so many details in it that they virtually live life. They live a virtual life. They swap out engines, they change tire sizes, they experiment with how the car handles, does it slide around the corners. This particular video that I watched it start to finish. Again, not my style of video, but this young guy, probably 15 or 16 years old, built a Crown Vic with 1,000 horsepower. And he was talking about how if he could get it lower to the ground, it would handle better. If he could put wider tires on the back, it would handle better. It wouldn't spin out. But then as he started driving it, he was comparing it to a car he had built the day before that was a faster car. It had more horsepower. It was more sleek. It was designed more. I think it was a McLaren that he was playing with. It was designed more to be a racing car. It was supposed to have better handling suspension, but he said, I couldn't get any traction in it. It wouldn't go. It would shift gears with so much horsepower. It would just spin all over the place. And so his learning experience was virtual and yet extensive. I don't think, though, when James Dobson and John Eldredge talk about the idea of a young boy getting out in the woods and exploring and taking risks and learning, that virtual environment offers the same richness of experience. Because you can crash a car 1,000 times in those video games, and every time you just hit reset and you start over. But you start driving like that on the street, and not only do you put other people's lives in danger, you put your own life in danger. And that becomes a permanent error. Instantly, you could go to jail. And instantly, your entire life could be changed. Not just your life, but you could take somebody else's life. There was a young guy who had that happen here in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. Oddly enough, his legal team was able to get him not spending the rest of his life in prison. I still haven't figured that out yet. He was found to have been suffering from affluenza. His parents had so much money, he's never been held responsible for anything. And so, again, he wasn't held responsible for killing 4 people on the side of the road. But he was 16 years old, brand new with a driver's license, and drinking while driving with people in his car, and then slammed into people on the side of the road. He devastated a lot of lives because no one had ever told him you have to be responsible, because he hadn't been allowed as he was growing up to take risks and pay the consequences for bad decisions. When you start marrying those two things together, it changes your perspective on life. James Dobson made the point in his book. He said, there's a transition phase when a little boy needs a man in his life, and it's absolutely based on his psychological and his biochemical development in his physical body. It's absolutely essential that a man of good quality and good character be there. And that evolution is between about 6 and 9 years old. That's when that change takes place, when he lets go of mom's apron strings and he's no longer a mama's boy. That doesn't mean he doesn't love mama. He just doesn't count on mama for every decision. And he starts looking for, what kind of man will I be? And if the man that he finds is in video games, the man that he finds is in movies, if the man that he finds is in society somewhere else, then that's the role model he's going to take on. But we have a deprivation of male teachers. We have a deprivation of males in caring industries. To be a male is either to be a superhero or to be an absolute idiot if you watch the media. Watch any kind of sitcoms, and mom is always having to bail dad out. Dad's always a buffoon. Dad's always a moron. Dad's always making stupid decisions. Dad's always making bad financial decisions. And if there's not a dad in the picture, then there may be another female filling that role, or there may be a neighbor down the road filling that role. And I'm just talking about average television sitcoms. And it's really hard. My mom did a great job. My mom was a single mom from the time I was about 9 years old. My mom did a great job. She worked very hard to parent us. But I was the only boy. And there was a lot that I could have learned between the ages of 9 and 19 that I didn't learn. I ended up learning them in books. I ended up learning as a researcher, as a studier, to become a better father. I heard someone say when I was young and married, and it took a while for it really to sink in, to be honest, but they said the best thing you can do as a father is to love your wife. And I thought, well, that's kind of bizarre. But extrapolate that a little bit, and to say it another way, the best thing a man can do for his children, especially his sons, is to love their mother in a way that they learn from. I've said it here before. You'll hear me say it 100 times. I don't want it to be a source of bad pride, but it is a source of pride that the girls that are dating my sons, I see it on Facebook. They joke with each other. One of them put out a meme and it said 4 things I never am allowed to touch. And it was the check, and it was the door handle to the car, and it was the door to the restaurant. And I'm like, I don't remember what the 4th one was from the meme. Robin can probably tell you. Maybe she'll share it again in the comments. I know she watches this from time to time. The idea that these young men have become the kind of man that I want them to be, that didn't happen by accident. And it didn't happen by beating them over the head. It didn't happen by pounding into them command and control, that they would do everything that I tell them to the way that I tell them to do it. I wasn't there to tell my son how to behave when he was out of town for a weekend. I wasn't there to tell him how to drive. I wasn't there to tell him how to treat his girlfriend. I wasn't there to tell him how to treat her parents or her siblings. And those have been learning experiences. Dealing with relationships is a huge learning experience. But when a young man has that foundation, when he's able to let go of mom and see a role model of what it means to be a man, it makes a gigantic difference in his life, a huge difference in his life. Now I hear, even today, just recently, I've gotten phone calls from people who say, I know someone who's struggling with a big problem, and this problem is huge and it's eating up their life, and they need someone to be accountable to. And I think, an accountability partner is one thing. An attitude of accountability is an entirely different thing. And I'm not opposed to being an accountability partner, but if your nature isn't to be accountable to begin with, no new partner, no quality of person, no amount of training on behalf of the accountability partner is going to make a difference. If you're married and you're not accountable to your wife, there's not a man on earth that's going to make you accountable to your wife or accountable to him. If you're a young man and you're not accountable to your parents or to your school teachers or to a scout leader or to a youth pastor, if you can't find someone to be accountable to in the environment you're in right now, no new person in that is going to be an accountability partner worth having, because accountability starts with you. It starts with your attitude. It starts with your mindset. It starts with your worldview. It starts with your ability to take responsibility for the decisions you're already making. If you're not responsible for the decisions you're already making, no one else is going to come in and pound that into your head. I love the way Tom Lane says it in The Influence of a Father by Tom Lane. Subtitle is How You Can Be the Role Model and Mentor to Your Children. Page 132, he says, some men resist accountability because all they have experienced are dominating or controlling relationships. They have never experienced a relationship in which the input and advice were only meant for their good. And we've seen that. Accountability starts when you've been arrested. Accountability starts when you've been busted even in your marriage relationships with some kind of addiction like alcohol or pornography or drugs or something of that nature, working too late, having an affair. When those things begin to fall apart and you have to be forced back into your lifestyle in a proper way, that's when accountability starts. When you start to lose everything, that's when accountability starts. That's not the way it's meant to be. Accountability starts with that reckoning in your own mind that if I do this thing, it's going to have this kind of consequence, and that's not the consequence I want. I'm not going to do this thing. That type of behavioral modification can't just happen in behavior. It's got to start with the heart and the mind. I truly believe most of that stuff starts in the mind, in the way that you think about things. And if you're not thinking on the things that are true and pure and holy and just and righteous, then you're going to be thinking on things that are not. If the fruit of the Spirit is not in you, love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, meekness, and self-control, then what will be in you is the fruit of the flesh. And those two combinations will destroy you. If you're not seeking the right thing, thinking about the right thing, and if your heart is not in the right place, then you're going to find yourself in a hard life. Is that the responsibility of men? I believe it is. I think for men to be able to stand firm and let a boy do the crazy things that a boy does, jumping off the roof where mom says, my gosh, he could break a leg. And dad says, yeah, but he might learn he can't fly. So let him learn. Let him learn while the price to be paid is small. Let him be adventurous while figuring things out won't cost him his life or somebody else's. Let him take risks so that he can learn what it means to take risks. And at all times, be the bumpers, like the bumpers in the side of the bowling lanes. They don't stop the ball from rolling. They don't even force the ball to roll in a straight path. In fact, you can even hit the bumpers and still score a gutter and never make a single point. But the bumpers allow you the opportunity to take a risk, to do something different, to do something wild at heart, something stretching the boundaries of who you are in discovery. That's the role of a father in a child's life, boy or girl, to let them adventure and be strong enough to pull them back if they get too close to the edge. When fathers are missing from lives, it's not a racial issue. It's a father issue. And fatherlessness, in my opinion, is a bigger problem. We've got to impact this generation of boys to learn what it means to be good, solid men. All of the problems we're facing, like school shootings, guns out of control, gangs out of control, drugs out of control, alcohol out of control, pornography out of control, video games out of control. I can't tell you how many weddings that we've DJ'd since we've owned our DJ company where the bride and groom have already discussed, even at the wedding, his addiction to video games. We even did one wedding where they wanted us to set up a full-blown sound system, video screen, projector screen so they could plug in the Xbox and let the men at the wedding, the groom's party, play a video game during the reception. And I said, I got no problem doing that if that's what you want to spend the money for me being there to do. But I am concerned that you're not going to have any interest on the dance floor. You're not going to have any interest in all the other things going on if all of the men, because it will be all men of all ages that are in there in that room watching that video game, either playing or observing. That's like turning on the Super Bowl in the middle of your wedding. Your wedding's not going to have any attention at all. I'm just saying. That type of addiction is impacting marriages, it's impacting kids, it's impacting families in a deep, deep level. But the reason those things are there is because the mind has not been occupied with the real adventures and expression of life. And so the only success is to live virtually. I want to challenge you today, if you are a father at any age, regardless of how old your kids are, engage where they are now. Engage with them. Converse with them, have a conversation with them, get involved in what interests them in life. It's not about you, it's about them. It's about the next generation. And don't try to control them in life. Just be the boundaries to protect them and protect others from whatever crazy idea they might come up with. And if their crazy idea is fatal, then obviously you want to discourage that. But let them boy. It's a verb. Boying is a verb. It's a thing that they do. Let them boy. And if you're a mother and you don't have a male influence in your life, find one. Find a youth pastor, find a scout leader, find a man on the street. And I don't mean a man on the street, I mean a man in your neighborhood who has sons that will allow them to engage together. There's huge opportunity. There are men out there all over the world who would love to help raise your sons because they know the value and the necessity in it. Give them a chance. I hope this talk has been an inspiration to you and it has been worthwhile for you. I am Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.